Welcome, ladies and mentligents, to another wonderful narration. I'm your host. Here's a kiss in case you don't finish the video.
Mwah.
Today's story comes from /HFY Wordsmith, Regal Legal Eagle. Please show your love to the author. Links are below in the description. BoB Space Trucker. Chapter Sink. OC, I'm sure a few of you have seen something like this coming. Well, you're right. So here it is. Humans were a paranoid lot after their first contact with a xeno species involved a fight for survival. And it didn't help that for all the actions the Unified Human Government, or UHG, took to persuade the galactic government humans weren't all that bad, the Americans surged ahead with defense spending and espionage. Of course, in a way that worked to everyone's advantage. The UHG got to say truthfully, they had no control over the Americans who rampantly provoked xenos on their borders and spied on everyone they possibly could, while then giving what they gained or learned to the UHG. Since spacefaring species all had one government, the xenos simply assumed Americans were some sort of subspecies and treated each government as entirely separate entities. One such espionage program the Americans had going took advantage of the fact humans didn't mind being out in the void of deep space. They had taken up major contracts with other xenos to repair and construct new FTL comm buoys, and even some of the galactic government comm lines. Since no one else was willing to go out and physically inspect these buoys in deep space, they didn't notice the new attachments the American crews left behind. Small robotic operators would monitor all the xenos' traffic and copy it off back to intel stations. With every passing year, the network got larger as xenos mistook the human fanaticism for repairing and updating comm buoys for their desire to prove themselves as a space-faring species. At one of those intel stations, however, a tech was sipping at a cup of coffee when he noticed a flashing light on his console. Bringing up the communication packet sent to him by a spy operator, designated as IHC, his eyebrows quickly shot up. "Sir," he called, waving over his superior. Specialist Rebecca Jones moved over and leaned over to see what her tech had found. "I'm not sure how credible this is, but someone is setting up an open bounty on a human. They also appear to be sending military orders to naval vessels. Do we know much about the species?" "Some sort of space crab, sir." She nodded as she read over the information on the screen. "Find out where their space is. I'll contact Langley and have them prep a carrier fleet. If they prove hostile, we'll glass a few cities and see how they feel about that." "Yes, sir. What should I do about the endangered human? Is he American?" "I have to do some digging, but it sounds like he's a space trucker, so there's a very good chance he is." She nodded at that and thought it over. "I'm sure he can handle himself then if he's a space trucker. But I'll see about getting some agents to track him down and see if he's getting us involved in a war. To take him out? Fuck no. If a lone American pisses off some xenos so much, they declare war on us that makes them the aggressors. Galactic law clearly states defenders have free rein in combat against aggressors so long as we don't engage in mass genocide. If they have any valuable resources, we can take the planets and toss them over to the UHG. Another flashing light made the tech tap on his console once more. Sir, it seems another xeno species is trying to find out where our main diplomatic center is so they can send some officials for negotiations." "What? Where are they sending the communications? To UHG Central?" "No, sir. They're trying to contact Washington directly. Apparently they're interested in an alliance after meeting with some guy named Billy Bob Space Trucker." Emily couldn't believe the varied and intense music that Billy Bob had her listen to while he slept through his own rest cycle. From what she understood, this was all pre-contact music. How had one species developed so many varied genres all on their own? Most species had one or two styles that carried across their music. But the only style she could find that connected human music was their love of repetitive beats or choruses in songs. That, and most of their music, seemed to be war chants and combat songs. But that might just be Billy Bob's music. The first record she had listened to, written by someone named Floyd of Pink, had been especially haunting and beautiful. When Billy Bob had finally started to stir, she realized she had skipped her second sleep cycle just to listen to more music. Her body was a little sore from the lack of rest at this point, and she needed some time just to process the music that she'd been enthralled by. So when he woke up, she began to move back to the bunk. "I'm going to have to sleep for this first chunk of driving, Billy Bob. You know where to go?" The trucker pulled his hat back into place and nodded. Getting up, he walked back through the cabin and found Mittens quickly hop off the bunk before Emily could toss him off, and followed along behind the trucker. Once he was docked, it was time to change. He opened up his security locker and began to dress more appropriately for the job at hand. He kept the jeans and plaid shirt, but lost the cowboy boots in favor of steel-toed ones. The hot sauce holster came off, and his regular holster came on. He tucked his M1911 into the holster and tucked 6 extra magazines into the pockets around his holster. After that, he pulled on a black combat vest that was a mix of ceramic and Kevlar plating. Then he slung a Remington Tactical 2070 over his shoulder before filling the combat vest pockets with various slugs, buckshot, and birdshot rounds. A few Dragon Breath rounds as well, in the off chance he'd need them. Finally, he tucked a Bowie into his left boot and another in his belt. Pulling his Remington off his back, he loaded a few rounds and then worked the pump with a very satisfying KA chunk. Lock and load. Emily was about to talk when he quickly slung the Remington back over his shoulder. "No, wait, hold on." He then pulled free of the locker a wooden Louisville slugger, the words MLB Prime Ash burnt into the side, and replaced his hat with a camo one with just the American flag on it. "All right, now I'm ready." His Louisville had a few scratches and some stains from previous use, but he wouldn't trade it for the world. Any world. "What are those things?" she asked, pointing at his M1911 and Remington. "Oh, I forgot these aren't common. So you know how the galactic government has strict laws against weapons possession and stuff? Well, they don't have very strict laws regarding ceremonial, cultural items. They also don't have a concept of firearms. All you Xenos have been using energy weapons and shit for centuries. Not humans. These are what we call guns. They house these little casings filled with chemicals that fire off once we pull the trigger. It causes a small, controlled explosion that launches a chunk of metal a few hundred feet a second. The action ejects the casing and pushes up a new one in this gun." He patted his M1911. "But this one requires me to work the pump. You'll see if I need to use them." Emily's mouth hung open as he explained to her what he was using. "You've covered yourself in explosives?" "Oh, shit!" "Well, they're made to not go off until I want them to. But yes." "How do you control such weapons? You don't have a targeting computer in your eye. Those are tightly restricted." "Fuck, humans don't need them. I guess we were lucky enough to evolve with the concept of tracking depth and movement or shit. I don't know. Physics. You saw me hit that space flecko yesterday with the bottle." She paused and then gave a shrug. "I guess I'll trust you." He grinned at her and then moved to the airlock. "Hopefully you won't need to use them." He looked back at her and thought it over. "Actually, might be more fun if I need to." He smiled wide as the airlock cycled and he stepped out into the station. Unlike the clean, well-lit refueling centers he was used to, this place had those stupid fucking flickering lights from horror movies. He glared up at the ceiling for a moment. He hated those stupid fucking flickering lights. There were stains here and there on the walls as he walked towards the entrance to the main station, and couldn't help but grin as he saw the 5 figures manning some sort of security station. These looked like blue space orc bears with horns and longer tails. But really, with those underbites and big features and guts, he figured they were more like space bouncers. Then again, space borks. He nodded. Yeah, space borks. They had an assortment of weapons and targeting computers over their faces, which meant the space goblins here had to be connected. However, from what he could see, they were wearing just normal clothes, with those shield belt type things. Lazy Xenos always figuring weapons were energy-based. The one in front looked bored as he stepped up, holding up a hand as he grunted at Billy Bob. "Stop right there, ugly. We don't know you and..." He didn't get further than that. Billy Bob just picked up his pace to a jog and swung as he moved. The bat collided with that fat, ugly head, snapping off a tusk as it sounded like he'd just creamed a line drive past third base. As the rest began to perk up, it was pretty much too late. Billy Bob was already up close. The second one he slammed in the side of the knee. There was a sickening crack as the creature howled and toppled like a falling tree. The third he jabbed in the face with the end of the bat, crunching the targeting computer into its 4 eyes. It cried out and clutched at its face while he moved on. The fourth had been stupid enough to leave his weapon on a crate, and as he reached for it, Billy Bob brought his steel-toed boot on the space bork's hand. As it squealed and looked at him in terror, Billy Bob brought the bat down on his head. Good night. The last finally heard the high-pitched tone of a weapon lock and growled out as he prepared to fire. But Billy Bob was faster. He pulled the knife from his belt, tossing it at the bork's arm, sinking the blade into the creature's shoulder. It howled and dropped the weapon, dripping blue blood as it gulped in terror. Billy Bob slowly approached as it gasped out. Why are you here?" Billy Bob stepped up to the larger creature and yanked the blade free, wiping it off on the bork's fur before slipping it back into his belt. Then he held the bat in one hand, resting it over his shoulder. "Us? We just came to party. Now take me to your leader."